Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nichman.
Are you a parent who struggled to find books and entertainment that are a good role model for your children and teenagers? Well, our guest today, Tal Tsfany, had the same problem, and he decided to do something about it by authoring his young adult novel, Sophie. Sophie embodies integrity, independence, and rationality. Find out more and get your copy of Sophie at sophie-book.com. That is SOPHIE-book.com. Hi, Tal. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio and our Heartbeat of the World segment. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm so blessed that your agent reached out to us. You have written a wonderful young teen adult novel that really touches on some of the issues that affect all of us and really go deeply in how we can discuss your point, I believe, for writing the novel, one of the points was really to get parents and all of us having deep, honest discussions about some of the things going on around the world. And I think you might have noticed some people are like with each other and not really having a honest dialogue. And this is the wonderfulness of your book, Sophie, is that we are able to really, sit down, see the life of Sophie and what she's able to accomplish and have an honest discussion on what this means for all of us. So before we go to share all those yummy details, share a little bit about your background, what brought you to writing your book, Sophie.
Great. So I was born and raised in Israel and went through the whole thing, including the Israeli army, and became an engineer. Went into tech and software, and this is what had me relocate here to the U.S. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, since 2006. And I've been in tech all my life. And then I read a book that changed my life. It was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It's a book that changes a lot of people's lives. Mine, it really changed. I decided to leave the job I was in and join a startup company. I started my own side company. I started writing a book, It changed a lot of things in my life and my understanding of life and the pursuit of happiness, as we call it, right?
What happened for you? What was like the defining moment that you looked at and thought, okay, this doesn't make sense to me? What are the perspectives or beliefs that started to shift inside of you after reading it? What happened there?
So when you grow up, you're injected with those moral ideas of what your life is all about and what's important, what is good and what is bad. And it was always coming from the Jewish background. It's like, it's about thy neighbor. It's about the others. It's about, your duty to society and your duty to your family. And the good was about other people. And every time I did something for myself, I was selfish and was like, not that good. And then what Atlas Shrugged did, it kind of challenged all of this and reversed the moral compass of my life. It said, no, everything is coming from me. My pursuit of happiness and my evaluation of other people is how valuable they are to me. So if they're close to me, they're my family or my close neighbors, so they're a value to me. So I should be nice to them, but I don't have any duty to other people. And then if you take it to the political sphere, I want to live in a place which is about individualism. It's about, the individual and their happiness and their freedom to choose their path. Yeah. And this is when I got really to understand the American history better, to read about it and fall in love with it. And as I went through that process, I really started thinking, because my early career was in education and I loved it. I loved being an instructor and an educator. And so those things kind of came together, philosophy and education, and it sparked the idea of, what if I wrote my own story? And I love talking to kids. I love kids. So I started writing this little short story about this girl and a boy. And they're talking about, they were actually younger when I started. They were like 8, 9, 10. They ended up being like 13-year-olds in the book. And they were talking about things like morality and, honesty and, is it good to lie? Is it not good to lie? And things like that. And then after I had like 12, 13 different stories, I kind of merged them all together to a book, which was a big mistake. It took me about 2 years, years to actually kind of finish that project. But
why was it a mistake to do it like that?
no, I'm joking. It's not.
Oh, okay.
It's not a mistake. I just the mistake was in my evaluation of how hard it's going to be. I was like, yeah, I'll just merge them together and I'll get a book. And it's like, no, it was much harder than that.
Yeah. Well, I think like every process you think, how hard could it be? I mean, when I first started my business, my consulting business, my ex-boss said, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years in corporate. It's going to be a piece of cake. Yeah. And I started, my first goal was in the first quarter, I want to make $100,000. It should be easy. I made $50,000 in corporate. I made $2,400. So I was a little off, but yeah.
Reality is a little bit more, complicated than we tend to think it is. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fabulous, now let's go to your book a little bit or a lot of it. Sophie, what was the prompting specifically for writing Sophie? What prompted you?
So I looked around and I always kind of seek for heroes and inspiration for my kids. I have 3 kids. When I started this, Ron, my oldest, was about kind of 15. He's an artist and he was drawing, so I asked him to draw Sophie, which kind of came to the idea that he illustrates the book. So this book, if you see it, that's Sophie. He has a manga style kind of Japanese art. So he illustrated Sophie.
That's so cool.
I have 2 girls. One is now 16 and the other one is 11. They were younger. And the idea was to tell them stories and find inspirations for them. And honestly, I couldn't find great heroes like the ones that I read in Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead or other books that inspired me. And I just took the task of creating one on my own. And so I started developing this character in my mind of a young girl, very independent, very rational. She knows what she wants. She's brutally honest about everything. She will tell you exactly what she thinks, and she'll tell you exactly what's right, and she won't sugarcoat anything to the point where it's almost insulting. And as a mirror, I created Leo, who is like her mirror. It's like the normal kid who's like, what are you talking about? Is it good to be selfish? What does that mean? So then I started this dialogue between them, and I wanted to really take her through a lot to show how heroic she is in dealing with hardships that a normal person will just give up. It's like, what do? I have no money. I have a sick mother. I'm in a foreign place. I'm an illegal immigrant. She's a Syrian girl that was sent by her grandfather. She basically fled out of Syria to the U.S. And she has a sick mother. She has no money. And she needs to start working at the age of 13. She starts gardening, and then Leo joins her. And the nice thing is that I told the story from a first-person perspective, Leo's perspective, who's telling, like, it's my diary. I'm writing about this girl. And we see it because I think if a 10 to 16-year-old, doesn't matter what range, reads that, they can be Leo, watching someone that heroic, being so sure about her ability to cope, having the pride and the self-esteem, and that was the motivation of really creating that, that role model for my kids. And I got a lot of feedback. My girl, who's now 16, used to be like 13 or 12, and I used to think about how she would act and respond, because she's great. She's very independent, very resourceful. So there's a lot of her in Sophie.
Aww. So when you were writing it, you got pieces, your daughter was part of the inspiration. That's
exactly. Yeah. So, and it got more and more intimate. I poured more into it, things that I am passionate about. I introduced the evil politician who's trying to take advantage of Sophie and her poorness. And Sophie is torn between the need to make money. She figures out, it's like the mid-90s, so she figures out if she'll learn how to code and program computers and create websites, which is a new thing, she'll make more money. And she does by herself. And that politician is using her and paying her, but she's running for mayor, that politician, and she wants to use Sophie's like single mother, single kind of parent family, and poor and illegal immigrant, and to make her as like, we can help her, we should help her. And then Sophie blows it up. She actually, the climax is where she talks in a rally that person organizes, and she says the opposite of what she's expected to say. And
You didn't
blows
say
out
a
everything.
script.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I wanted to, a lot of me of like, showing what I believe and
Yeah.
is in Sophie. Yeah.
Wow. And we talked before our interview together that our society, I don't know if it's around the world, but at least here in particular, I've seen that we've become so enamored with this kind of heroes that are not natural, like Superwoman,
Yes.
Spider-Man, Batman. Awesome. They're fun to watch and see them kick butt and do unnatural things that no human could ever do in a million years. It's fun on a Saturday. But I was talking to an actor and he said, what bothers me is I remember being an actor, even playing some of these action heroes, but it was done without the CGI and it was more real. Like you told a story. And at the end of the day, the person watching the film wanted to be the person playing it because they could emulate that.
Right.
And now we've kind of lost touch of what it really means to live to our full potential as human beings. And I think that's what you're bringing to the table with Sophie is showing children and adults that, hey, this is living to your full potential using your God-given gifts to the fullest. And what would that look like?
Exactly. So, well, two things. First, I have nothing against science fiction because it expands the possibilities. I love science fiction, but in a good way, in the sense that, new worlds, new frontiers and stuff like that. But you're right. From a cultural perspective, it shows a little bit about how bankrupt we are, where we cannot create real life heroes. And it's very hard to find, for instance, I don't know if you heard about the series Outlander. It's a new one, and it's real. Like it's true that she travels in time, which is science fiction, but the story is so good and they're so real, and you can really look up to those. There's a hero and a heroine and their romantic relationship. It's great, but it's a gem. You have to find between all of the series about sex and drugs and those awful things. And made up worlds with made up characters and dragons and stuff like that. You try to find those that really inspire you. And you want, art is all about taking something that it's like food for the soul.
Yeah.
You want something that you take and you say, now I'm going to make my life better because of that. So, that's the definition of art. And I think in a lot of cases it's bankrupt today. You look at the Hollywood, movies, most of them I don't want to take my kids to. It's just...
Not to mention, I could feel in some of the movies today, especially today, that there's a kind of agenda, storyline, or narrative they're trying to put on the audience. And I hadn't noticed it at first until, my partner was like, I don't like that because look what they're trying to tell you here. And then I look, I'm like, oh, wow, they are trying to give you a message that's specific. It's not just telling you a story and saying, what do you think, viewer, listener? It's kind of like, here's what you should think.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot. Actually, I had... an interesting discussion with my kids about Disney. You look at the Disney movies and they're all about if you sacrifice yourself to someone, then you're good. If you're selfish and you're making money, you're the evil. They're always this dichotomy between do I take care of myself or do I take care of others? And there's always this agenda that says, oh, you greedy bastard, a selfish character versus the, altruistic, care for everyone hero. And love always wins, which is, in my mind, a simplification of the real world. Love is not that easy. Love needs to be thought about and seeked. And you have to define what it is that you fall in love with. But they always like magically, emotionally coming out of, and then they live happily ever after. So even the morals of a Disney movie, for me, are problematic today. Like you said, it's not thought-provoking. It has an agenda, a very specific moral kind of angle to it. And for me, I don't mind exposing my kids to the opposite agenda, or at least, if it's moral. Yeah. So for instance, there's a great movie called Captain Fantastic, which is the kind of the opposite of what I think. But it was done really well. So I sat down and saw it with my kids. And then we had a very interesting philosophical discussion about, is it good to live in nature and to be part of nature? Is it good to change nature for human beings so our lives is better, like this house and this furniture? I changed nature to make it fit my life. Or do we go out to the woods and try to be animals and be kind of naturalistic, which I think is inhumane. But that's what environmentalism is all about, is less footprint. right to the point where maybe we'll die and then there will be no footprint.
Yeah.
So I'm great with kind of challenging my point of view, but in an honest way. When it's on the table, this is what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I love that. And when you were mentioning kind of the whole idea of love portrayed through a lot of the children movies, it's kind of a over the top, super romantic. Ooh, everything's perfect. And what ended up happening, I think, to all of us, including me in my 20s, I thought, find your prince and knight shining armor type thing. And then when you get into real life and people got married early, I didn't, but a lot of people got married in their 20s. They're like, wait a second, this is not a prince. I'm not having a perfect life. This is
a little
hard.
bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, this is hard paying rent and mortgage and car payments. And you begin to realize, okay, this is nothing like the movies. And then it begins to seep in that that's an unrealistic version of love. Love isn't always like a bowl of cherries, as they say. Sometimes there's difficult struggles, but it doesn't mean love doesn't have to be there. And so I'm loving that you brought a lot of these topics with Sophie to the table. What are some of the other, discussions you wanted to bring forth with your book? And with
so it's funny. I did a talk in a high school earlier this week, and they asked me the same question. I said, let's just take the first chapter and see what Sophie brings to the table. So it starts with Sophie sitting in a park, reading a book. It's on the grass, and and Leo is riding his bike, and he sees that girl. She's funny looking, a little dark. She's and the first thing he notices is like she's in a bubble. There's a lot of noise in the background, and he doesn't mind it. So he walks up to her and he gets really close to her, and she's still focused on the book. She won't kind of face up to him and kind of look at him. And so the first thing is like focus, right? The need of the human mind to focus on one thing and go deep. If you want to really do deep work, important, meaningful work, you need quiet, and you need to be quiet, and you need to focus. And what I see a lot these days with the phones and everything is that we forget how to focus and do real meaningful work. So that's the first thing. The second thing, he tells her in the first meeting something that he didn't tell anyone else, that he draws characters and, like my son, manga characters. And she says, like, I love this. Would he show it to me? And he says, yeah, but don't expect too much because I'm not that good. And she said, what do you mean? You mean you're not that good yet, right? And he says, yes. And then he thinks about the fact that he's always frustrated because he's comparing his work to like a master. And so the second thing that Sophie kind of teaches him in that very short chapter is that be positive and talk nicely to yourself. You're the most important person in the world. So don't, we don't know how to speak to ourselves. We get down on ourselves and we like to beat ourselves up and see all of so the second thing about having self-esteem is to be nice to yourself and respectful to yourself. So say that, be optimistic. I'm not that good yet. And she sees in him from that moment on, his ability to become an amazing artist that he actually, in the end of the book, and I don't want to spoil too much, he becomes that amazing artist when they meet again as adults. Yeah. And she sees that potential in him. And the last thing in the end of that chapter is that she walks away. And he looks at her and he describes it as like she's taller than she seems to be taller than what she is. She's like, she's walking up straight and very erect and kind of walking and having that posture about yourself, about I'm worthy, this is who I am, is another thing to learn. And so all along the book, he sees her dealing with hardships and challenges. And he's just amazed, and he learns something new about her. And there's other things, they talk about religion, they talk about morality, they talk about a sharing is caring day. They have a sharing is caring day in school. And they're like, what's going on? Everything kind of messed up. They break her telescope. She gets a telescope as a present from an older neighbor who sees she's interested in science. And she wants to make a point. So they do a sharing is caring day, and they break her telescope. And then she's not frustrated with the fact that they broke her telescope. She's frustrated with the fact that they didn't understand. Having a day that is called sharing is caring day is all wrong and will end up in something bad, because we want to trade with people. We don't want to sacrifice stuff. I want to give you something for a value back. So she explains to him. So all along the kind of the book, there is more and more things that are, like you said, I'm handing a discussion point about selfishness, about virtue, about being honest, about telling lies, about working hard and committing to a goal. And they're having those discussions that I really like, because it's really, you can see it as a reader. It's like, oh, this is the pros, this is the cons, this is the good, this is the bad. What do I think? Yeah. And I get great feedback from kids who read the book to say, it was an interesting book. It made me think.
Yeah, and kids like to be challenged, and they like to have their opinions matter. I think that's one thing that as adults we forget. I mean, I've talked to a 5-year-old. Sometimes a 5-year-old will be describing something and they'll be going on, and I'm like, will you just get to it already? But they have a different way to kind of roundabout get there.
Yeah, they need to chew it, right? They need to chew it and kind of mess with it before they...
and they're like, just... Tell me, spit it out. But actually, if you are patient, they can reveal major wisdom and gems that we forget as adults, because we get so ingrained into the small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff, but we get ingrained into, I got to go pick up the laundry, I got to da-da-da-da. And then we forget about, some of the small prizes that kids are so in tune to that we kind of just tune out and forget.
And there is a reason for that, because they're an empty box, tabula rasa, as they say. Yeah. And they need to create and program their operating system. And they ask amazing questions about why is it, I just, had a call with my mother, and she said, do you remember that you made me cry when you were 6 years old, claiming that there is no proof for God, and I need to prove to you that God exists? Wow. And I said, no, I don't remember that. She says, I really cried because I couldn't explain to you. It's all this different discussion about religion. But, as an adult, you have an operating system. You have to have a philosophy in your life, and you either run on it and try to do the best, or you question it, which is a hard thing to do. So I read the book that changed my life, Atlas Shrugged, at the age of 40. And it was a whole year that I almost had to stop my life and try to reprogram my philosophy of life, my moral direction. And I find that not a lot of people are willing to do it. It's like running a car and it's just trying to switch an engine of a car while running it. It's almost impossible. And kids have to go through that process. So you see a lot of 5 and 4 and 6 year olds asking a lot of why questions and challenging you. Yeah. And you see it again when they're like 15 and 16, when they're older, and they really have to kind of get ready and program their philosophy of life. And this is where they challenge you, and they disagree with you. And rebels. Yeah. Rebels. And I'm the kind of parent that's like, let's have a discussion. I don't take my truth, be an independent thinker and figure it out for yourself.
Well, I like that you mentioned this, because you said you must have a solid foundation or philosophy in your life. And I've had a woman come on a couple of years ago. She's a businesswoman. She said, some people say, who do you serve as a client? I serve everyone, because they want to, I want all the clients. So if I kind of make it like this kind of niche, I'm going to lose business. She said, but it's the exact opposite, because if you serve everyone, no one knows what you're about, and they're not going to knock on your door. They're like, I don't know what she sells. I don't know what she has to give me. So I'm just not going to knock there or go there. But she said it's the same in personal life. You can't say I stand for everything, because then you fall for everything. So she's like, you have to have a personal compass, a personal thing inside of you that says, this is what I stand for, and this is my value system. Exactly. It can't be, I just stand for everything. And I kind of think that's where the whole political correctness has come along. Don't, just stay in this little box. Don't kind of go this way or that way. Just stay right here in the middle, which kind of just makes everyone feel okay.
Yes. Don't offend anyone. Don't judge them. And judgment is how we live. Do I eat this or I eat poison? That's judgment, right? Is that person good for me or bad for me? That's judgment. I think this whole PC culture is just destroying free thinking.
Yeah, it is.
Because first, of course I want to be offended. Offend me as much as you can, because we're trying to get to the truth, right? So, those safe spaces is just ridiculous to me. It's dishonest, and it's
It's not helpful to everyone.
Anti-reason, right? It's
Yeah.
because debate and discussion and chewing of ideas and getting offended is, and if you don't want to deal with someone because they're stupid, they're racist or whatever they are, just don't deal with them. But it's freedom of speech that comes first. And what I worry about is that all that politically correct will lead to action, which is try to silence people forcefully. And this is where, Western civilization will collapse if we limit free speech.
Yeah. And Tal, it's interesting because a couple of years ago, I had a woman on. She's a psychotherapist, and she wrote a book called Life Well Lived. And what really stuck out for me in the book was that she said, we've gotten to a point with political correctness is that we live like that. We don't tell the truth to ourselves. Forget about others. She said, I was convincing myself I'm the best darn psychotherapist in the universe. I have the perfect marriage, the perfect this, perfect that. The truth of the matter was I was working so much. I never saw my husband. My kids hated me. And, life was pretty not good, and a personal level. And it wasn't until I could get honest with where I really am, instead of making it look pretty for the world and myself, that I was able to actually go deep and, as you said, really challenge my beliefs and really, in her case, really get deep and where am I? Where is my value system? And rearrange it so that I'm living my core values.
It's interesting. I found, the difference between integrity and honesty. So integrity is honesty for the inside. It's by true to who you are, your integrity. So don't fake it. Don't be someone who you're not. Do what you love and be honest about what you're good at, what you're not. And honesty is kind of for the outside. I'm not telling lies. I'm looking at reality and describing it exactly as it is. So it's kind of funny, the kind of of the understanding of those two terms of having high integrity and having full honesty. And I truly believe that, it's just good for you, really, really good for you to be of high integrity and deal with the tough reality. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes you don't succeed and you fail.
And, what's really cool, Tal, like even this conversation we're having here and we have every week with wonderful people around the world is the fact that we all don't think alike, but that's okay. Because we all have awesome stuff to bring to the table, different perspectives that can have us open up our mind to, I never saw it like that.
How boring would it be if we all thought the same, right? I love the different colors of people and the different thoughts and the different viewpoints. And I love to discuss. I try not to argue too much. I found that arguing is not leading to anything. So every time somebody wants to challenge me, I say, okay, let's just make an agreement that we're putting our heads together to find the truth. Rather than butt heads and.
Well, when I've come across people who are like, my mind is made up, but I'm going to, argue with you. I'm like, well, we are, you're not willing to open up and hear my point of view. So let's just end the conversation. And let's,
there's no point, right? You have nothing to gain.
It's all good. But what's really great is that there is, if we all open up the possibility, and that was the reason that we even started the segment is because on my business show, Savvy Business Radio, we've been on 6 years and more and more people, thank you. After 6 years, I started to notice right before the election last year that people were coming on the business show, but talking about their personal political beliefs, some of which, like myself, were not even political beforehand, but they felt very, very strongly about one point of view or another, to the point where they were actually, I thought, a bit mean to my audience. Like, well, this team is like this and la, la, la. And I was like, okay, we need to have a real conversation, kind of like with Sophie, your book. It was kind of like, okay, this is not helpful, and this is not going to stop the polarization and the division. So let's have a real honest conversation, have people around the world with their different perspectives share where they're at, what they've learned, and their unique perspective on what's going on around the world with varying topics. And it's been very well received, but the whole point is really for everyone, just like your book, Sophie, to really sit around the table, hopefully with dinner and your cell phones over here turned off or upside down, where you really just start to have conversations honestly, listen to your kids and vice versa, listen to your parents, what are their points of view, and just really share and not like tear down, but share like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Right.
Let's go deeper.
And it's I think the thing as a parent that is most important to me is to equip my kids with the intellectual honesty to have those discussions. Like you said, to say, okay, I'm coming to a discussion with my critical thinking, with my independent thinking, and I'm going to listen. I'm going to try to get to the root of the problem and think in principles, because the amazing thing about this reality all around us is that it's consistent. It never lies, right? It's always consistent. There's always an explanation to something that happens. And our mind can be inconsistent. It can have fallacies because of the way we conceptualize it. It's our mechanism. It can, it's error prone, right? It's just, I can make mistakes. So every time I'm trying to get to the truth on the outside, I'm trying to see if my concepts of reality are reflecting it in a consistent way. So every time somebody shows me some kind of an consistency in my thinking, it's a great flag for me. It's like, maybe I can get something even better. Doesn't matter in what kind of walk of life, if it's morality or politics or whatever. Everything has to kind of work together, because reality that's its nature. And so the most important thing in discussions, in human discussions, is to be honest and to have principled thinking. So when we have discussions about gun control, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Before we get into gun control, what are the definitions here? You know, let's understand what we're talking about. There's like good foundation. It's almost kind of science applied to, everything else. Yeah. Because in science and in engineering, you start with definition, very clear definitions. We have, in math, we have equations and clear definitions for every variable. And then we can start playing with it because everybody's looking at the same thing. In politics, it's all blurry and you don't know what they mean when they say social justice and they say, gun control. And so what do you mean by that, right? Yeah. So
what's your definition?
Exactly. So what I try to teach my kids is to have this mindset of let's define what it is. Let's talk about the root of the problem, because there can be so many, cases of things going wrong where the whole thing is kind of based on a false premise. That if you fix that, then all of those things go away. But people like to talk about the minutiae. Okay, this guy's this, and Hillary's that, and Trump is this. It's like, okay, but this is for the next 4 years. What about
afterward?
And try to get to the bottom of things.
Exactly. I really love that you went there, because it's really like, let's take the minutia, as you said, just a little key point about this and turning this, or, when it comes to this happened here, so let's just focus on an event. No, let's focus on the entire, where we are now, period, as an entire country, a world, and then where do we want to go forward, and set the premise, the kind of foundation, then go from there and see how we're going to accomplish that.
Right. Talk about the principles that define this place. And one of the things in Sophie is that she loves America. And her whole motivation of the book is to stay here, because she's illegal and she needs to save money to stay here, to work with an immigration lawyer to get the visa. So that's kind of her race against time, because if somebody catches her, she could be deported. And I don't want to, again, spoil too much, but it actually is a real threat in the end of the book. So, so falling in love with the principles of the founding documents of this and the founding fathers of this country, and understanding why, when you get a lot of people in one place called America, and you say, hey guys, do whatever you want, pursue your own happiness, don't hurt each other. We're going to have a very limited government that is going to make sure that you guys don't hurt each other, and do whatever you want. And what you get is people moving from huts to skyscrapers in 100 years, creating a whole industrial revolution, discovering electricity and the steam engine and everything. While in other places of the world, you have either a monarch or a totalitarian regime or religious regime, but everybody lives for everybody else, for the tribe, for the, the priest, the rabbi, the king, whatever. And then your life becomes miserable. So you ask yourself, why is that happening? And then you go a level beneath and you say, what does a person need in order to flourish? And then you get to the level of, like, if you look at a squirrel, what does a squirrel need? What is their philosophy? They need to find nuts, bury them, and find a place to live and reproduce, and they'll be happy. That's the means of survival of a squirrel. What is mine? Am I really strong? No, any bear can beat me. Am I really fast? No, a cheetah can chase me down. what is my means of survival? And then you get to the point where our means of survival is our mind, our ability to conceptualize and conceptualize this world and talk in words. Every word that I utter is a concept, right? A cat doesn't understand what a table is. They can perceive it, but not conceptualize it in a word. So if you get to the point that that is our means of survival, then you start to see the relationship between that mechanism of conceptualization and freedom. Because the enemy of thinking is force. Force. So if you put a gun to my head and say, do math, I can't. I cannot function. If you tell me, don't do what you want to do, do something else, my ability to think, to flourish as a human being is diminished. So when I got to the connection, the beautiful connection between mind and freedom, this is where you see why we're flourishing, and freedom of speech and freedom of movement and freedom of property and property rights and our ability to say whatever we want and think whatever we want, as long as I don't hurt you, which is the role of government, right? To make sure we don't hurt or cheat each other. That's it. Leave them alone. And this is how because you can't figure, why was it, good in Israel from one perspective, because there's a lot of freedom of speech and everything. But it's socialistic in a way. So the economy is not doing that. And then you look at Europe and it's like a mixed economy. And then if you look at the 18th and 19th century, mainly the 19th century of this place, this is the most amazing period of history from my perspective, just seeing people coming with nothing, poor people, coming from all over the world to seek one thing, which is freedom.
Wow.
No safety net, nobody, no social security, no public schools, no public healthcare, nothing was there, nothing. All roads were private.
But they all wanted to come here anyway.
They would sacrifice their lives to come here.
Can I ask you, I'm so curious, this is really bringing up something for me. Tal, what is your perspective on why a lot of the populace here has started to change to wanting to be pulled to a more tribal kind of different way of being, like socialistic maybe, kind of less individualistic kind of thing? Why are they kind of going away from the beginnings of our forefathers?
That's a big, big question. And it runs really deep. It goes all the way down to the core philosophy of who we are as human beings and what is morally right for us. You see, there's like two worlds in philosophy. One is the kind of Platonic, I would say metaphysical or view of the world that then continued with people saying there's no way to really know this world. So what is really true? Either a philosopher king will tell us what is true, or God will tell us what is true, or then in the kind of 17th, 18th century, philosophers started saying, no, the tribe or the collective will tell us what to do. There's a collective awareness. And this is how you got communism. This is how you got Nazism. You got all of the let's think together. Let's be one united consciousness.
But generally in those places, they have one leader. It's not like it's not like they're Borgs where they all do stuff together. It's kind of like they still have, we're all like collective, but we still have one leader.
Yeah, it started in Russia. They said, it's the proletariat, right, that we're serving. But the evolution of that is like, who gets to decide what the people think? Then you have to elect someone that tells you what the people think, because there's really no people thinking together. There's you and you and you and you, and each one of you is thinking and wanting different things. And then the other part of philosophy is Aristotle, right, who's pro-science, pro-reason, pro-seeing the world. And if you think about this way, you get to the Enlightenment that happened like way later. But then you got science with Newton and Thomas Aquinas, and then with philosophers like Ayn Rand, who's advocating reason and individualism. And the amazing thing is the founding father, Thomas Jefferson, really got the idea that a human life is about freedom and about reason. And then you get the philosophy of individualism, of reason, of science, and freedom. And so you have those two worlds colliding. And honestly, the reason is the universities. It's what our young people are learning of what is good. And if you see what drives people is their morality. All people want to do good. The question is what good is. So if you program an 18-year-old to say the good is caring for society, for equality, everybody's equal, and you have to fight everyone who's advocating inequality, right? Inequality, then capitalism is bad because it creates societies, the better everybody is.
Yeah.
You know, in Africa, you know, in some cases everybody's poor, zero inequality. Here we got like billionaires and people that, you know, barely make it. And it's great. I would rather be a poor person in the US than being in Africa, right?
Well, at least the deal here is if you're poor, we've seen poor people pull themselves out of the gutter and out of the ghetto and become rich, or at least self-sufficient. And when you're in a place where it's totalitarian, yes, I did then there is no option. It's either you stay there and that's where you're staying forever.
Right. So I think the foundation of a healthy society is the protection of human rights, our ability to think, to speak, to keep our own property, and to trade, you know, freely. And then that's the role of government, and everything else is open and is, you know, people can do whatever they want. They can be stupid if they want, they can be smart if they want. It's their choice, it's their life. And that's the definition of the pursuit of happiness.
Wow.
It's your life, you do whatever you want with it. You can go south, you can go north, you can do whatever you want, but that's the beauty of freedom. And when you ask me what's creating we're going in the wrong direction, it's the bad philosophy and you know, people getting back to the ideas of awful philosophers like Kant and Hume and Hegel, where they're teaching you not to trust your mind, trust the collective, to take things on faith, and really just the world out there is unknowable. So let's use collectivism to really try and figure things out, and collectivism just leads to death.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Tal. I'm noticing by talking to, you know, people about some of these difficult subjects sometimes, is that really their mind and is not open at all. It's like they've become completely non-rational and completely emotional. And it's interesting. And if you try to bring rationality, and let's just bring facts to the table, or bring, you know, rationality to the table and examine that from, you know, your angle, my perspective, they're like shut down, boom. And I'm like, that's very interesting, because honestly, you know, if you're going to college or whatever, you think, and this is funny, I've told my boyfriend this, that in college I drove my professors crazy. I challenged everything they told me, because just because it's out of a book, I don't believe it. You gotta prove it to me.
Explain it,
yeah.
Prove it to me.
You gotta prove it to me. So I used to argue with them all the time, even in mathematics and psychotherapy. I was like, no, just because Freud said it, I want you to prove it to me. So I used to drive them crazy. I'm surprised.
That's awesome. That's the sign of a critical thinker and someone who's really interested in the truth and figuring out the truth. And it's true that we stand on you know, shoulders of giants, but some of those giants are really wrong. And you see that knowledge always is advanced, right? Nobody really got everything, right? So challenge. And you're right. I think emotionalism is the number one problem we have today, putting emotions before reason, to the point where you see like crazy things happening in campuses where people just shut down. It's like, I'm now being emotional. I don't want to talk to you. I don't care. And that actually leads to violence in the sense like, I'm so hurt, I don't know what to do with my emotions, so I have to act them out, right? And not have a calm, rational discussion about.
And it's interesting because you'll say, well, you know, this kind of violent. No, you're hateful. And I'm like, okay, that's not helping. But what was wonderful about this today is that I'm hoping everyone listening, and parent or otherwise, really thinks, okay, let's just have an honest discussion. That doesn't have to be, you know, screaming and hollering. It's just having an honest discussion. We begin to open up the the realm and hear everyone's perspective, honestly, without shutdown and without, emotions. You might have some very strong emotions about stuff, but still let the person speak. And this is going to be wonderful. So where do they get Sophie today, and how do they get a copy?
Well, so Sophie is available in Amazon, and I have a website called sophie-book.com. They can see all of it there and read about it, read about me, read about the process of writing the book. It's available in Kindle if they want to read an ebook. Available as any other book. And the feedback that I get so far is amazing. It was worth it just to get the feedback of kids who say, "Oh, Sophie's so interesting. I love her." And if one child decides to be a little bit more rational and seek the truth like Sophie, and be brave as her in pursuing her own passions, and like Leo, by the way, Leo is another hero, and then it was worth all of it. So.
Yeah. And you mentioned a very key point there, and it's brave. People don't realize that one of the things that's part of the growth of the human being is wanting to be socially accepted. And if everyone socially is going along with political correctness and don't rock the boat, don't have your own idea, just, be equilibrium, it's hard to be Sophie and step out and tell the truth about what my core beliefs really are, at fear of being ostracized or worse. So it really is brave to step out and be, have your core values and live them out in the world. If
we didn't have those brave people, we wouldn't have an iPhone, we wouldn't have an Amazon, and we wouldn't have those people that challenged everything around them and rethought everything and was brave enough to fight a lot of criticism and a lot of doubt and push through and be brave enough to do what they want. And those are the people that kind of push the world forward, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Orville brothers who created flight. I mean, so many people are telling me, that's crazy. If God meant us to fly, we'd have wings.
Yes, exactly.
We don't have wings, so we weren't meant to fly. But thank God they didn't listen to everyone, because I love flying.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I thank you so much, Tal, for coming to share your great wisdom today. This has been an enlightening conversation that I hope enlightens everyone listening in. And everyone, please go get Sophie today. And again, Tal, thank you for coming to Savvy Business Radio and our Heartbeat of the World segment.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.